Thank you very much, Professor Giuliani, and thanks to you to come for this lecture. Well, first of all, I introduce myself and the organization I work with. And just as Professor Giuliani already said, just keep in mind all the time that I'm not a scholar at all. And I am an activist, so the point of view I will bring you today is completely different from the point of view you are probably used to. So just whatever I say, just keep this thing in mind. So Source International is an international NGO that has been founded 10 years ago, and our main scope is to defend communities affected by extractive industries, providing them scientific evidences and legal tools to defend themselves against the misbehavior of big multinational corporations. Over 10 years, we have been working in more than 40 cases all over the world. Here is a small sum up of all our cases. As you can see, the vast majority of our cases are in South America and related to mining, but we also have cases related to oil and gas and a lot of agricultural commodities and all of what we can somehow comprehend into what is called the extractive industries, which is not only extract a stone from the ground, but extract resources from wherever. Our main office is here in Pisa, but we also have an office in the United States, in Colorado. And those are all the projects we have pretty much updated, I would say. So when we speak about extractive industry, we speak about something like this, like open pit mines, huge mines, huge plantation, or case of pollution like this one, which is one of the cases that we will see tomorrow. So today I will talk you towards more sort of theoretical framework of what I'm seeing about the extractivism. And then tomorrow we will see some practical case. So we will see this picture again tomorrow. This is a lake that has been used as a mining waste deposit. And now it is so polluted that basically you cannot use this water for anything. It has been fenced because even just get close to the water is dangerous for human beings. And this is, again, another of our cases where you have huge mining waste together with city waste. And despite this, there are people just collecting waste into the rubbish like it was in a slum, despite having a huge multinational corporation making a lot of profits inside their community. And a lot of damages to health, which is reflected as a result of the pollution. Sorry, it's kind of hot. And this is, again, another of our cases in the Amazon forest, where you have gold mines. And as you probably know even from movies and books, they use mercury and they tend to pollute huge amount of rivers. And then people used to drink this water and obviously get seriously sick. And this is another picture of one of our cases in Peru, again, in the Amazon forest. This is actually my hand, you can see, this line. And it's near an oil facility, an oil extraction facility in the Amazon forest, where there was this corporation was extracting oil and having constantly oil spills. So, and this is how we work. So we basically collect evidences. This is in Mongolia, in a mining area in Mongolia. We just collect evidences with scientific instruments and provide to the community the tools and the data they need to bring their case to a court or to an advocacy campaign or to press release or whatever. We also somehow adapt to the reality, so we build our own instruments because we are a small NGO, so we are not like a university that can invest hundreds of thousands of euros in their projects. Some of our projects are really made with a few thousand euros, few $1,000s. So sometimes we need to kind of build our own instruments with like some portable materials, and we have to keep warm the instrument. This is a funny picture I liked because it's like this is this is in the city in Peru, or Cerro de Pasco. We will talk about it tomorrow. Which is at 4,400 meters of elevation. So it's cold, and those instruments doesn't work with cold. It's too cold. Below zero, they don't work properly. So we took it's a dog bag, the bag you use to bring the cats and the dogs around, and we put some wool, and this is one of those, like, electric water bag, the one you put when you're cold in house. So to keep the instruments warm with some wool and some electric heating, and we were able to basically make this work. So this is a bit the work we do. We collect evidences, like, for example, collecting the hair of people to see the bioaccumulation of pollutant and heavy metals, basically the same that they used to do here, or they do here, to check if you are assuming drugs or something, and we do it for see if they have been polluted, and then obviously bring all this to the legal cases. So why we work on environment, this is a bit short, but there is something that is a bit out of our radar. But environmental pollution is something really concrete that we have to face every day. So these are data related to 2020, where all the weather-related disasters in the world caused roughly 40,000 dead in 1 year, according to WHO. All the killing, including wars, was before the war in Ukraine. I didn't find more recent data, but still, there were still plenty of wars and killings all over the world, and count for roughly 600,000. HIV is still counting more than 1 million people died every year, even if it's completely out of the news since a few years now. It was the year of COVID that caused almost 3 million. Those are the official data. Probably there are more as we know, but these are the official data, more or less. Malnutrition, which is also out of the radar, also killed 3 million people. And always according to WHO, pollution that year caused 9 million people died. Of those, roughly 3 million, so the upper part, let's say, the red one, are dying for air pollution. And those are mostly people who live in big cities in Asia, mostly China and India. And the other 6 million is for water pollution, of which roughly half, so 3 million, is organic pollution. So basically, there are people who die because there's no toilet, just to make it very simple. People who died for bacterial infection caused by the absence of latrines. And 3 million dying for inorganic pollution. And those are people who die for the water pollution caused mostly by industries, cities, and wastes. So despite being something that we don't speak every day, I mean, it is something that is very real and concrete all over the world. Think that only in the United States, all the water polluted by the abandoned mine that had been abandoned 150 years ago after the gold rush are enough, if we put it into bottles, to go to the moon and back 54 times. There are so much polluted water all over the world that will last for centuries that it is something that it is a problem today, and it will be even more a problem tomorrow. So basically, this is an introduction of my organization, Source International. I'm happy to give you more information, more details if you want, but I kept very short because I want to pass to the more theoretical aspects of today. So our speech basically is about extractive democracy and capitalism. I wanted to start with something, and basically this will take most of the time today. And you that you have read the papers probably already know. I'll just start with the idea of, I mean, we have seen my end with oil in Peru, but you would say, okay, there is oil spill, but at least they're making a lot of money. You know, this trade-off of making money from one side, polluting the environment from the other side, which is the big question about this, about the extractivism. It is the big question in any sense. It's like, okay, I don't think there is anybody who agree that extractivism is positive for the environment. Everybody know that there is an impact. As soon as you cut a tree, there is an impact. But if by cutting the tree, you can keep yourself warm and don't die of cold during the winter, then the trade-off for you is positive. You know, you have a tree less, but at least you survive the winter. So there is a debate that going on since centuries, basically, on how and if extractivism is good for the economy or not. And I give you two papers. One as one theory, the other one basically showed that that theory is not true. So there is one thing I want to show you. Those are the countries that are more dependent on extractivism. So those colored are the countries that their GDP is dependent from extractive for more than 33%. So more than a third of their economy is based on extractive industries. And some of them are agricultural commodities or energy commodities or mineral commodities, the different colors. And the white one are the ones that are not based on any commodities. So what is the first thing you notice? South America and Africa. So that's countries that are not particularly developed, let's say, are the ones who are more reliable on extracting, but also countries that are not particularly democratic, like all the Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, they're all dependent on extractives. There is basically very few exceptions of this. A little bit Australia, obviously, and Norway. We will speak about Norway a lot because it's the only basically exception to this paradigm. But all the rest, if you see the countries that are more dependent on extractives, are countries that are more vulnerable, that are economically less dependent, and also less democratic. They're also the more violent, the more prone to wars, and well, basically the countries where you'd prefer not to live. But this is just an empirical data, no? But you can see also, like more in details, the list of countries by revenue as a percentage of the government revenues, how much is from extractive industries. And you can see that all the first countries, right, Nigeria, Chad, Kazakhstan, Guinea, Zambia, DRC, they are all countries with fragile economy, fragile states, conflicts, and other aspects. While when you come down to Germany or United Kingdom, it's basically zero. So mostly of the country up, the first 20, 30 countries are all countries with a fragile economy and fragile rule of law, fragile state, and they're heavily dependent on extractive industries. But this applies also at a smaller scale. There is this quote, which is really interesting. Generally observed that in countries with the greatest plenty, there is the poorest living. And you might think this is something that came out today, but this quote is from 1711. So it's already 3 centuries that basically we have already empirical data somehow that it is not, it is called the paradox of plenty. So it's like having the plentiness is not the best. Let's go more in detail. This is the United States, and this is a map I downloaded this morning from the Geological Survey, the United States Geological Survey, with the ore deposit of coal in the country. And these are the states by poverty count. So you can see, is there anyone from the United States here? Well, the poorest region of the United States is called the Appalachian, which is this part of the United States, which is where exactly all the mining rush came 2 centuries ago for coal mostly. So those countries that are the poorest are basically this one. And look, this is super interesting. New Mexico, which is the only really poor state of the western part of the United States, is exactly where all the mines are. So, and if we go like in Europe, it is basically the same. This is the map of the Human Development Index in Europe. The green is the better, the orange, dark green, light green, then orange, and then red. The red is basically the less developing part of Europe. And this is the area where the extractive industries has been more prevalent in Europe. So look at this area of Spain, Sardinia, all the part of East Germany and Poland. Even in the United Kingdom, you can see the difference. I mean, all of us knows that the poorest part of the United Kingdom is Scotland, which is exactly where all the oil came from. And if you go more in details and speaking about Italy, for example, we do the same. The countries, the regions with the lowest human development index are the region of the south, as the Italian knows, but they are also the region where the more extractive industry is. We in Italy, we produce a lot of our oil to be a European country. We produce 8% of our oil, and all this oil is produced in Basilicata, which is the fourth less developed country. And if you go even a smaller scale, we have been working in Basilicata quite a lot. There is this village of Viggiano, which is where the oil is, which is basically like a sort of abandoned village. It's really, really like poorer than the other village around. We will see how and why. And also Sardinia, which is also the country where we have the last mine in Italy, the only one still working in Portovesme, and it is one of the poorest regions. And there is actually a paper which is kind of famous about the European coal cores. Basically, everywhere in Europe, we see coal extractions, historical coal extraction. There is almost 10% smaller per capita GDP than other areas. So again, this goes from the wider spectrum of see the entire world to the smaller. And these are just the empirical data. So that's what we observe. We see that country, region, municipalities with more resources are poorer, with a few exceptions. Now, let's go and see why. There are several aspects, and some of them is easy to understand, some of them a little bit more complex. Some of them is still debated, but we'll go through all of them, and then we will see some case tomorrow. First of all is the volatility of the extractive sector and the extractive industries. You base your economy and your development on something that you don't control the price. Take an example of Venezuela recently. Venezuela started a huge, an enormous social, social benefit program when the oil was $180 per barrel. Then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, I mean, in 1 or 2 years, the price of oil dropped to $20 because the United States started extracting oil shale, and then there was this fight with Saudi Arabia, and basically, and so all their economy collapsed completely. Because imagine that you plan your 10 years program on something that is your economy will boost, will receive, I don't know, 20 billions from oil, and then all of a sudden you receive 3. So everything collapsed. And you don't control. This is the price of oil in the last 20 years. It's absolutely not controlled. And there's no one country, even the country with the biggest reserve, can really control the oil price. You're probably familiar with OPEC, which is the Organization of Oil Producing Countries that tried somehow to control, but even them failed because some country which is not in OPEC, it's still a big producer, and therefore they basically fight one each other to control the price. So oil typically is absolutely fluctuating. But we can see on a longer scale copper, which is one of the cases we will see tomorrow, for example, copper is the same. It goes up to when there is a war, you need more copper because you need, there's infrastructure to build and you need for the army and everything. And then as soon as there is a bit of peace, the coal price goes down. And then basically there is an oil crisis. So everyone starts to invest in electricity to find another source of electricity. So copper goes up, then goes down, then you have up and down. Now there is the new economy. So there's copper up again because we need it for electric cars and electric vehicles. And iron, basically the same. You might think that iron is something that we use every day for everything. I mean, look at where you're sitting on, and you might think it's more stable, but it's not. But then you can argue, okay, I cannot do maybe a 50-year plan, but I can do a shorter plan. For example, nowadays we all know that new minerals are key, and that if you invest in lithium now, you should be okay, because we all know that lithium from here for the next 20 years, it will be very much requested for the electric cars. And, Europe just tried to pass a law to ban non-electric car by 2035. Didn't pass, but it will come. If not 2035, it will be 2050, and we will need a lot of lithium and other minerals. So with the new green economy, you might think, okay, now I can invest. Which you can think, yeah, why not? But 3 years ago, we were saying the same of cobalt, and this is what happened. Because they discovered that manganese can work better than cobalt. And then maybe now everyone is investing in manganese, but then in 5 years, they will discover that, no, well, actually cobalt works better, you know, or there is another mineral, maybe there will be kryptonite or whatever, that it will work better. And basically you cannot do any long-term plan on unless you have oil, like Russia, for example, but there's a bit of an extreme example. It's also like gigantic, huge country, but for a normal country, let's say, it's more hard to have everything. And even if you have everything, I mean, it's so volatile that it's really hard to plan on this. And then there is another phenomenon that is called as Dutch disease, which it takes name from because it happened for the first time in the Netherlands in the 60s, where at the end of the 60s in the North Sea outside Netherlands, they discovered huge deposit of gas, and they start extracting gas and look at the increase of gas production at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. And what they realized a few years later is a reduction of the manufacturing. Why? Because by producing gas, you export a lot of gas and you sell this gas in dollar, or oil or copper or lithium, you sell it in dollar, and therefore your money, it becomes strong. So this is an economic aspect. If you sell something a lot, if you do a lot of foreign investment, foreign revenues, then your currency becomes stronger, and therefore you are less competitive in selling other products. So I don't know, a tulip produced in the Netherlands become more expensive than a tulip produced in Belgium at the same moment because their currency was too high. And this is something that we see a lot in developing countries, and we'll see in the next slide. This is the same thing that happened a few years later in the UK. When they discovered the oil in the North Sea in Scotland, they start look the manufacturer share in the Scottish economy after they discovered the oil and gas in the North Sea. Because obviously the pounds become so strong that they cannot export anything else. Everything was too expensive on the market. And this is exactly what is happening nowadays in Peru. In Peru, they start extracting a lot of oil in 2014 and mining boom exactly in 2014. And I'm working in Peru since 2008, and this is the only, I mean, normally when you work in a developing country, you always have a currency that every time you come back is more valuable than the time before. But in this case, in Peru, in the last 10 years, it has increased actually. When I came to Peru the first time, the sol was 4 for 1 year, now it's 3. So there has been a 33% increase in the value of the sol respect to the euro in 10, 12 years. And this obviously is a problem for anyone in Peru that want to export something different from resources. If you have a manufacturer in Peru that you're producing, I don't know, boats, and you want to sell boats abroad, they are too expensive. And therefore, probably they will buy from another country that makes it cheaper. And then there is another effect that we will see a lot in our case studies tomorrow, is the enclave effect. The fact that the economy of extractive industries is closed in itself. It stays there and basically does not contribute at all to other sectors. This is Peru. So Peru, and we will see again tomorrow, is the second largest silver and copper producing country in the world, and the third largest zinc producing, and zinc is another of those minerals that today is going up a lot with is one of the new minerals. A lot of molybdenum, lead, 8th largest gold and cadmium producing, and the 10th selenium producing country. So it's super rich country in minerals, but look how many jobs are in mining. 1.2% of the population of Peru work in mining. It's very little labor intense. Mining and also oil extraction, especially offshore oil extraction. On an offshore platform, you possibly have 100, 200 employees for something that produces billions. So in reality, the return of the real economy is very low. Those 1.2%, they gain a pretty decent amount of money to be in Peru. Being a miner in Peru is considered a very good job. You probably earn double than a professor. Yeah, because there's no job. You don't need more people. It's all industrialized today. It's all, back in the days, used to have more people mining. But nowadays, you can run a mine with 300 people, of which 150 are engineers behind very high technological machine. Same for oil extraction. Oil extraction in a platform, you will have maybe 100 workers and then 50 or 60 engineers behind a computer that control all the machine. And that's it. And this is a calculation of how many revenue you produce for every employee you have per hour, I think. No, per month, I don't remember. But anyway, what you have to see is the difference. The energy sector produces an incredible amount of benefit for workers because the workers are very little. So you have a lot of money produced with little workers, so the ratio becomes the highest in the world by far. And obviously, who made the money are the shareholders of the company, which very often doesn't stay in the company. I mean, a lot of this money ended up in Bahamas or Cayman or other fiscal paradise, Panama or San Marino if you're in Italy. And then the other aspect is the economic suppression, which it goes in a very complex way. But the point is that if you have resources and it's such an easy money to make, you don't have any incentive to develop other type of economies. And the clear example is this one. So this is like 500 years. It's a long, long term. But in the 16th, 17th century, Spain was by far the richest country on earth. They owned the entire South America, basically, and they were extracting an incredible amount of, as you know, of minerals from South America, like literally ship over ship of gold and silver brings from South America to Spain. And then when the Industrial Revolution arrived and all the countries of Europe, UK first, but all the rest start to industrialize themselves, Spain did not. It's the yellow one. So it's the lowest of all. And why Spain did not? Well, why should I make an effort to industrialize my country when I can still take all the money from the ground easily? So the fact that they had this huge amount of money coming easily reduced their ability to expand other type of industry. And this is the same if you see in the United States, again, the Appalachian and New Mexico, which are this is the mining areas, and these are the poverty count, because they're exactly where they didn't develop any other activities. And there is this, this is an investigation from the Senate of the United States that clearly recognized that the presence of coal in the Appalachian has played a significant part in its low pace of economic development. Our best estimate indicate that an increase of 0.5 unit in the ratio of coal revenues correspond to a personal income with 0.7% decrease. So for every 0.5% of more coal, there is a 0.7% less richness in the area. Because again, it becomes that everybody wants, and we'll see tomorrow in a specific case, when I mentioned in Peru, miners is a good job, as it is in the Appalachian. Nowadays, miners are well paid. There's no more like in 18th century. So everybody dreamed to become a miner and want to be a miner, and nobody thinks that they can start another job, another activity, like an industry or a small business or whatever. You just grew up with the idea, I have to work in a mine, I don't care about my education, about starting, I don't know, a small shop selling beer. No, because it's much better to get into the mine. On a large scale, that's the result. And even if we go, again, if we go more restricted, this is West Virginia, which is in the Appalachian, and the counties with the biggest coal reserve, the biggest coal reserve, are exactly the one with the lowest GDP, actually personal growth. So it's basically correspond exactly to the country with more mining. Which it comes to the other point is what is the rent-seeking behavior, which is one of those cases of complexity, let's say, between the economy and social behavior, in where it's what I just said is, if I can make money by renting, why should I develop any other activities? Which is it's a bit of a joke, but not too much. It's a bit Pisa. Pisa, everybody that own a house make money by renting to students, as you probably know. And actually, it's true. There's no other economic activity in Pisa other than student-related activities or tourism-related activities. It's a fact. If you go to Pontedera, which is just 50 kilometers outside, and there's no students, I mean, you have the Piaggio, you have industries, you have some other type of ecotourism developing the surrounding. If you have something easy where you can make money, that's, again, it's a bit of a mixture between economic theory and some social behavior, but that's what happened. And it is, I mean, this is exactly more, it is exactly what happened most of the time in developing countries where, let's take Nigeria, for example, that is floating over oil. And every Nigerian government who arrive just dream of extracting more oil, selling for the best price so that they can make money quickly and promise to develop the economy or whatever. But then over 50 years, they never really started to develop any other activity, any other economy, because it's a rent seeking. It's much easier that way. It's much faster. It requires less investment, less skills. But also it creates obviously more conflict. What we have seen before in the map, the countries that are more related to extractive industries, they are generally more poor, less economic stable, and all of the things that we have seen, but also conflict. There are way more conflict in countries with resources than in countries without resources. And there is this, this map is exactly a map that puts together the oil field, the mining, and the armed conflicts in Africa. I mean, in some cases, you cannot even see which one is which. And there are a few reasons for that. This is a super famous paper that came out in 2000, I don't remember. Should be 2005, 2006, something like that. From Collier, Paul Collier. Paul Collier was is a professor at Oxford University and former director of the World Bank. So A, it's not a stupid. B, it's not not like a revolutionary Marxist, let's say. But those are two quotes from his book. Basically, his study demonstrate with a lot of data that a country that's primary commodity export around 5%, 6% of its conflict, but when the export goes to 25%, then the chance of conflict rises to 33%. So it's basically linear, the amount of conflict you have with the amount of resources. And ethno-political groups are more likely to restore a rebellion rather than using nonviolent means or becoming terrorists when they represent regions rich in oil and also in minerals. And especially what creates more conflict are the minerals and the oil, because it's like, even psychologically, it's like what it gives you rich, becomes you rich for oil. Not everybody drinks oil. And some minerals, especially if they are small, they're easy to smuggle. Typical example of diamond. The diamond are the best way that an armed group can have to finance themselves is having diamond, because they are small, so super easy to smuggle. They're easy to extract, so you don't need a lot of technology. You just have to dig in the ground until you find a stone. And so it's easy to control. You have an armed group, you own a mine, put some of your armed people around the mine and force people to work in the mine and take out your diamond. Same happened with coltan. You know what is coltan? Cobaltum tantalum is the most important new minerals that is in every of your phone, every laptop, every basically technology in the last 20 years. And coltan is also stone, so super easy to extract, mostly concentrated in Northeast Congo, in Kivu, which is one of the highest conflictive area in the world. There are, I think, something like 20 more armed group fighting over there. Every small armed group own a mine, smuggle coltan, and can continue to finance their work, basically. And this is a new theory that is rising these days, that also global warming, so the climate change mostly, it creates a scarcity of resource that also increase in conflict. And the typical one, the typical resource we can mention here, we spoke about diamonds and oil before, but this is water. I mean, with the rising in temperature, the climate change, there are less water available, and obviously groups are keen to start war over the control of the water on big scale and on small scale. We have seen, I mean, conflict over water on a bigger scale in Pakistan and India already in the 70s. But Israel, Palestine is pretty much also, there is also water involved there. But also we can see in smaller scale, in Peru, 60% of the conflict are related to water. Like small conflict, maybe just community conflict with no dead, just maybe people throwing stone at the police. So it's a small scale conflict, but they are related to somehow to water. And with climate change, it will be more and more and more. And then obviously democracy, as I said before, those countries that we have seen, they are not only less developed country, they're also country with less rule of law, less democracy, and less less participation, less involvement, and weaker democracy. And this graphs also put in relation the democracy index with the oil income per capita, and you can see a clear trend of countries that are pretty much related to the oil extraction, things about Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Emirates, Arab Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Libya, Gambia, Nigeria. I mean, all of those countries are definitely, they have a lot of oil income per capita and a lower time to develop democracy. While other countries like the European countries, for example, that doesn't rely too much on oil extraction and oil export, they have stronger democracy, or Canada or others. And same for corruption. If you put the index of corruption and the index of the same index, so basically the natural resources dependence is pretty much, again, a pretty clear correlation with Russia leading, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, while countries like Finland, Belgium, they are on the other spectrum, so lower dependency from extractive industries and also lower, a bit higher, lower level of corruption. And there is a study in mining in Africa, which is, as I said, this is often at a big scale, but also small scale. This study of mining in Africa basically see that an individual within 50 kilometers of a recently opened mine is 33% more likely to have paid a bribe in the past year than a person that lives 50 kilometers of a mine that's still not open. So there is basically a clear correlation between how far you are from the extractive sector and how much is corruption. And obviously, I mean, this is pretty much, I mean, there are plenty of cases where Guinea, for example, where the former president has been convicted to have took a bribe of $600,000 or something like that from an oil company to concede an oil concession, and then has been arrested. But there are plenty of cases, even in a small case, even in small scale, and we will see tomorrow, for example, in Peru, which is a very particular country where the negotiation for the right to extract minerals are considered strategic and therefore being secret. So this is like the perfect recipe for corruption, obviously. And also the revenues, the royalties are not fixed by law, but they are negotiated case by case. So there's basically a secret negotiation over royalties. So it's obvious that a company will try whatever to get the lowest royalties, and the functionary from the government will do whatever to take the biggest royalties for themselves. And we will see tomorrow that basically in the mining region of Peru, of the Pasco region, basically every governor that has governed the country for the last 30 years, every of them is in jail. All of them. There is no one that is free. And the last election that was like 3 months ago was really ridiculous. At the second turn, they have a double turn, like in France. You know, the first turn and then the best two go to the second. The second turn where both candidates were already alleged for corruption. So you had to vote between one corrupt and another corrupt again. So this is obviously an extreme case, but it's not hard to understand that if you have, it's an easy way to make money, super easy way to make money. And then the last one I speak today, but I will speak extensively about this tomorrow when we will see a special case, is that all of these infect the land use and the pollution. It's not something minor. In Colorado, so Colorado suffer somehow from, probably you've seen before, we have an office in Colorado, so I'm pretty familiar with the situation. And it's not a case that we have an office in Colorado. Colorado suffered from the gold rush 150 years ago. You've seen in the movies and in Mickey Mouse cartoons. They were, today, 150 years later, there are 17,000 kilometers of river that are so polluted that their water cannot be used for anything, not even for electricity. The water is so polluted that if you put it into a turbine to generate electricity, the deposit will corrode the turbine super quickly, and therefore they cannot even produce electricity with the water. Not mention fishing, or not mention agriculture or drinking, obviously. And this obviously has an impact on the long economic development. Think again about Nigeria. This is the Niger Delta. Nigeria extract tons of oil, and they had made, I mean, someone in Nigeria had made tons of money with oil, but the country is still pretty much poor. And moreover, the area where the oil is extracted, which is the Niger Delta, it is so polluted that basically you cannot do anything else there. You cannot fish, the fish are all die. You cannot use the water for agriculture, so if it does not rain, you cannot basically irrigate. The ground, the land is so polluted that you cannot grow anything. But even and yeah, this is the effect of an oil spill in the Niger Delta. So I mean, how can you fish there? It's pretty obvious that on the long run, you cannot really develop any fish industry, but not even create food. And this is, you might think it is so far, but this is Europe. This is in 2009, I think, I'm not sure, maybe 2010, when a mining dam collapsed in Romania, the Baia Mare mine collapsed, and all the cyanide of the dam went into the Danube, which is the biggest river of Europe. It's like a huge river, and got polluted for 2,500 kilometers, and all the fish died, and basically there were roughly 100,000 fishermen out of job in a day. Then, being Europe, they probably have already get some subsidy or something to keep them some sort of alive. But things the same thing happen in Guatemala or in Nigeria, and obviously it will be the collapse of the economy, the collapse of family, and maybe even people die. Basically, the pollution that is created is there is first of all, I mean, polluted water and unsafe food is pretty obvious. It has a cost. We needed a pandemic to realize this, but now we have realized that people sick is also a cost. So when you have a lot of people that are getting sick and they don't have access to healthcare, it is a huge cost. There's a loss in productivity. There is a loss in the workforce. Then there is a loss of biodiversity, which is also on the long run a cost. Another example is in Guatemala. It's actually a case that we are working. There is this huge extension plantation of palm oil. They use all the water of the river. There are 2 rivers, and they use all the water to cultivate the palm oil. Therefore, those 2 rivers didn't arrive to the sea anymore. So there is intrusion of saline water from the sea that has killed all the mangroves of the forest, of the coastal forest. And this means that the mangroves were the area where all the fish were reproducing. So this means that the fishing economy has gone, first. Second, the erosion has increased a lot, creating a lot of damages, and therefore having a huge cost for the country again. Human disease, after 3 years of pandemic, I don't need to explain you that is very much related to the destruction of the environment. Decrease of crop yields, obviously. I mean, we have seen Nigeria. The production of the crop in the Niger Delta is obviously reduced by far. And decrease of soil productivity, and therefore you have to use more agrochemicals, and as a result, you still pollute more, and it's a sort of cycle where you don't end up very well. This is something that we will see more in details tomorrow, because I'm almost out of time for today, and also because tomorrow we will see on a concrete case exactly what is happening on this and other cases. But it is one more thing about how this extractive model bring you like easy cash on the short term, but then on the long run, it is more a cost than a benefit. Welcome. I am aware that I'm the last step between you and the weekend, so it's an unfortunate role that I'm playing here. But just hold on 1 more hour. I will try to be a bit like yesterday, so be short so that we leave time for question at the end. And as I said yesterday, today will be a kind of a follow-up. So yesterday we have seen, like, from a theoretical point of view, what is extractivism and how this affect the economy and the situation of the person and the situation of the country or the regions or the place where this happened. And today we go to one case. So we will see one case, and basically we will see all the things that we have seen yesterday, but applied in reality. So yesterday I brought you a lot of examples and numbers and graphs, but on a global scale, sometimes country scale or regional scale. Today we will see one specific case. It is a case that I've already mentioned yesterday a few times. It is a case that I'm working in since 15 years. So it's a case that I know very well. And it's the case of Cerro de Pasco, which is a city up in the Andes of Peru, at 4,400 meters on the sea level. So it is very high. Used to be the highest city on Earth until a few years ago. Then there is another city that popped up from nowhere near another mine, which is called La Rinconada, which is actually 5,100 meters on the sea level. So imagine there is a city highest than the Mont Blanc, highest than the highest point of Europe. The tip of Cerro de Pasco will top like the 3rd highest mountain of Europe, of the Alps at least. Yeah, it is this one. It is a big city. So, and I choose this case study also because it is a big city. So it's a big scale. It's not, a small communities with 500, 600 affected people. It's kind of a big scale. It's 80,000 inhabitants. Therefore, it's pretty much the size of Pisa, students included. And then, it's a city. It's a proper city. This is another picture. It's of this city with this huge, enormous open pit mine in the center of the city. The mine actually has already destroyed a huge part of the city, including the most culturally valuable one. So the main square that was built in the colonial area in the 15th century has been destroyed. The main church has been destroyed, all to take place for the mine. It is a very, very old operation. So again, it's a perfect case study because it's not a mine that arrived 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's a mine that is there basically. Legends, but also some historical facts, says that actually already the Incas were mining there before the Spanish arrived. And actually, there is a small story that I promise to be short, but I like to tell you that if you know the story of Peru a little bit, of Latin America, so Cortés arrived with the Spanish, and there was this civil war among the Incas, and Atahualpa, that was at the time the emperor of the Incas, with 7,000 person against 120 Spanish, basically was kidnapped. And there were like 3,000 people dead by the Spanish because they have firearms and horses and everything, and the other guys has nothing, basically. And then Atahualpa, when he saw that Cortés was very angry of gold and silver, he was in a room. He was in a sort of a jail. There was a house. He promised him to give a house full of gold and 2 houses full of silver in change of the ransom. And Cortés agreed. He sent people to take, his fellow goes up in the Andes to take the silver and the gold, bring the 2 rooms of silver and 1 room of gold to Cortés. Cortés took all the gold and the silver and killed Atahualpa. And part of that silver arrived from Cerro de Pasco. So this is, to me, it's a bit of like, somehow, from there to now, 500 years has passed and nothing has changed. Because basically today, still, we take the silver and the gold from Cerro de Pasco and leave there nothing. And actually the promise that we give to local people, we don't maintain it neither. We will see a lot of those things. First of all, as you can imagine, there are explosions in the mine. Now the mine is a bit stopped. Now they are retaken operation last year. So the house got destroyed, the house that are closer to the mine. And here it comes, the first thing that we saw yesterday, and we will see more in detail afterwards, is the fact that this house got destroyed, and then the mine will buy this land because they will enlarge the pit. But the point is that at the moment in which they buy the house, how much can you get from this house? So the depreciation of your property is a first step. And the second step is that they will buy your property. But despite that, it creates some sort of small scale of that rentier state that we realized yesterday. It is, I know it sounds crazy, but people dream of their house be bought by the mine because it's the easiest way to get money. Because at the end, the mine, is a Swiss gigantic company. They don't care to pay €1,000 more. And for them, it's just a great opportunity to get money. Anyhow, your house is this one. So if you can sell it, it's just the best thing you can do. And then one thing, this goes a bit more into the details of how a mine works, is the fact that when you see this gigantic pit, you have to imagine that a good ore, it can contain, depending which mineral, but it can contain as a maximum like 100 grams of, let's say, zinc per a ton of rock. Therefore, you take out a tons of rock, you process 100 grams of zinc, and then you have 999 kilos and 919 grams of waste. And therefore, you get waste everywhere. And they start accumulate those waste in what is called stockpiles. So like whatever they found space, basically, on top of the soccer field. And you can imagine like children plays here with the dust with a mineralized dust coming in windy days. On top of the hospital, this is the public hospital. So when you get sick, if you get sick, and you get probably sick pretty often in Cerro de Pasco, you ended up in a hospital when if you open the windows, you got the dust from the stockpiles. And some of these stockpiles, this picture you have seen it yesterday too, has been just thrown into a lake, into two lakes actually. And this is the Culacocha Lake. Culacocha in Quechua, which is the local language, means the lake with a lot of seagulls. Now you can imagine that there are not a lot of seagulls here. I know that you are all surprised, but there is the Andean seagulls. There is a seagull who live in the Andes, which is a small seagull, actually pretty cute. And then from the lake, the water came out, and you cannot see very well, but the difference of color, I mean, explain pretty easily that there is a polluted water coming into a clean river that won't be very clean for long. And this is the water discharge of the mine that basically goes directly into a channel that goes directly into a river. So, and no filters at all. This water contains, the penultimate analysis we did, it contains 400 times lead over the limit. So the concentration of lead was 400 times over the limit. So, and this picture I think you saw also yesterday, it is the people who works into the collecting rubbish outside the town. Just, I like, it's a beautiful picture, first of all. It was made not by me, but by a professional photographer. And I think it is a bit of the picture of this extractive system. You have a huge mine that produced $60 million revenues every year. And back in the day, it used to produce $300 million per year. In the peak of the mine in the 70s and the 80s, the production was $300 million per year in a town of 80,000 inhabitants. So you would have expect, to have such a rich town, but you have still people like scrabbling the rubbish to find food or plastic or whatever, then they resell. Or even bringing their dogs and their porks because they don't have enough to feed them to bring into the rubbish, and then obviously by accumulate all the pollution and everything. So, as I said, at its peak, the mine was producing $320 million revenues per year, employing at its peak roughly 7,000 people. So it was kind of relevant. But I'm speaking now about the 60s and the 70s. As I mentioned yesterday, mining today, it has become more and more technologically advanced, and the miners are always less and less. But despite being less, there is this phenomenal economic suppression that we have seen yesterday. So this is the exportation from the entire region of Cerro de Pasco. Cerro de Pasco is a region that has 150,000 inhabitants, of which 80,000 is in Cerro de Pasco. So it's a region that has only one city, a big production city, and then basically where half of the population live. And then, the rest spread around in like farmland. The mining sector is count for 79% of the, actually both, because this is unprocessed minerals and this is processed minerals. Sorry, other way around, processed mineral and unprocessed. So they go to basically 99% of the exports. Basically $342 million exports from the region come from the mining sector, and there is only like 5 million from agriculture and livestock, and 200,000 from machines to grain. How do you say the moline? What's it in English? The grinding machines. Yeah, grinding machines. Basically, there is one factory of grinding machines for coffee mostly. But the production is very small. You can see it's $0.2 million, so it's like 200,000 euro, $200,000 of export. But the economy or the export economy of the region is basically 99% mining. And this is also like that was the export. This is the production. We're still mining. It's like maybe 60% of, or probably even more of the entire production of the region. And let's see the job. the mining job are this one. This color, which is the mining, these are the jobs created by mining. So despite being the enormous, biggest by far economy, the amount of jobs are insignificant, basically. I mean, look how many people, okay, the majority obviously is in the agricultural sector. This is the entire region, so you have to consider that there is half of the population which is not in the city, fine, but still, it's less than 0.3%. I mean, it's like having a big supermarket in a town, basically. The amount of work are pretty much the same. Because today, these data is from 2020, but today there are 280 employees in the mine, which basically is like in Pisa, the Carrefour, you know, a supermarket. A big supermarket has 280 employees if you count the 3 turns, the people who bring. So it's like, that's pretty much the size of Pisa, one of the many supermarkets of Pisa. That's roughly but the economy of the supermarkets of Pisa would be minimum. This one is huge. And then we see now what we said yesterday with this concept of the rentier state. We have seen that there is a tendency of invest less in education. So those are the rankings of the departamentos, so the regions of Peru, how much they invest in education per capita, so for each inhabitant. And you can see that Cerro de Pasco is among the lowest. The region of Pasco is among the lowest. And actually, those are a few data about Pasco, the region, in comparison with Peru. There is a poverty that is almost double than the national average. Extreme poverty, which is a good 50% more than the national average. Actually, even the GDP per capita is lower, way lower. It's half, less than half. Because obviously, the people who make money from the mine, they are not living there. So that doesn't even increase the GDP, the per capita GDP. There is a higher infant denutrition. There is a way higher child labor. So almost half of the children in the region of Pasco, they work. Some of them also study. So it's not only work. Some of them study and work, but still they work, almost half of them. Analphabetism is higher because we have seen there is a less in investment in education. And actually, the woman analphabetism is even higher than the average analphabetism. Because something that I don't remember if we mentioned yesterday, but there is normally a disproportion, because obviously the mining job are seen mostly as a man work, it's a man job, historically, traditionally. There are a few women miners today, but traditionally is a man job. So if you are a family and you only have 2 kids, and your biggest dream is that one of your kids will become a miner, you invest more into him to make study instead of your daughter. And these basically apply to pretty much everything.
What is the capita of a mining worker with respect to other workers in the region? We have data.
It is higher. It is higher. I didn't think about to look for this data, and I don't know exactly, but normally they tend to gain, like the average salary is
The average of Peru?
in Cerro de Pasco. In Cerro de Pasco, it's normally $400 per month for a miner, which it will be, but that's his gross. But I guess will be maybe 600 gross, because 400 is net. So it's probably around 7,000 or 8,000, so higher than the average.
Less than Peru average.
Yeah, but you know how the GDP per capita works. In Peru, you have in Lima maybe a few millionaires that will increase the GDP per capita. But generally, in Cerro de Pasco, or at least, I mean, in all Peru, being a miner is a good job. In that sense, I mean, the companies pay pretty well for their employees. But and that's also why there is this competition, this dream to become a miner. Because at the end, the miner is the one that can maybe buy a car, have a television, and, you do a proper life. Generally, if I remember well, it's around $400 for a miner. So a professor will take less. A miner gain more than a professor, at least in Cerro de Pasco. So, and this is what I was. I mean, we will maybe it would have been better the other way around. But anyway, we will speak then later all the impacts of the mine. But we have seen and you know, everyone is aware in Cerro de Pasco. Everyone is aware that there is pollution and the pollution is killing people and that there is a huge impact on the health of people, of the children. It's out in the news every day. If you watch any, or they listen a lot the radio there, you know, the community radio. Like every day there is some news about pollution, the lead pollution, the kids that are sick, there are protests every week. But despite that, there are still people who protest because they do want the mine. Because of that, what we mentioned yesterday, the rent-seeking behavior. They feel that selling their land to the mine is like winning the lottery. So there is a lot of people that actually do whatever they want. They celebrate to have their land to sell to the mine, to do whatever. Because actually, as I said, the mine pay more for the workers, but also pay more for the land. But then also there is this aspects of the rent-seeking state, or the fact that there is a high level of corruption. And the region of Pasco is one of the highest level of corruption in Peru, if you check. And this is the news that I found for something I mentioned yesterday, that the former governor is in jail. So this one is 8 years. I double-checked this morning. There are 3 former governors of the region of Pasco that are still alive, and all of 3 are in jail.
Because of you or me?
No, not because of me. No, no, because of corruption.
Because I know you tried to do some lawsuits, I guess.
Yeah, but not against the governor of the region, but against the company. No, not because of me. Although I have to be honest, when this guy went to jail, I wasn't very sad. Yes. This is something absurd, but he was the former CEO of the mine, then resigned from the mine, ruled for the regional office, got elected as a regional governor, then was elected twice, so 8 years, and then when he stepped out, came back to the mine, to the company. So just to mention how much can be, you know, the reliable. And this guy is the one, because I will speak this later, but I mention now since you mentioned, in Peru is worse than Italy in terms of politics. They change government every every 2 weeks, basically. And especially the ministers. Since I worked there, I've been working with, I think almost 20 health ministers. And there was one, was a woman, that she was very, very keen and wanted to help in Cerro de Pasco, in Lima, I mentioned, the central government. She actually took some budget from the government, and if you are anemic, basically your intake more metals because your body is more anger. So the easiest way to reduce your heavy metals intake is to, it sounds counterintuitive, but to take like iron and B vitamins, because it will reduce your level of anemia, so your body will be less hungry and therefore take less heavy metals. Okay, so the easiest way to do is that she bought with the money from the government, like anti-anemia pills for all the children of Cerro de Pasco, ship it to Cerro de Pasco, but then the health system is regional. And when they arrive in the region, this guy stopped the distribution of the vitamins. And
why?
Because he was the former CEO of the company, and that was somehow admit that there was a problem, while you always deny it. Yeah, and this is what I mentioned yesterday, like the grotesque aspect of it, that the second turn of the election was against 2 guys, both corrupted, both with allegation of corruption. So basically you vote the first run, and the second run was the choice. This is the news says the two that passed to the next turn in Cerro de Pasco, they are both with allegation of corruption. So it's a bit like almost a joke. And then we came to something that yesterday we spoke a little bit less, but today we will see, like in the proper case, is the pollution that this causes. Remember that now we are taking an example of a mine in Peru, but this can basically be applied to oil facilities offshore, mostly onshore more, but like oil facilities in Nigeria, for example, or the huge palm oil plantation of Malaysia and Indonesia, or rubber plantation in Liberia. And then, I mean, I can give you hundreds of examples, but, you know, all of those big extractive industries, they tend to pollute. And let's see what this pollution means. Someone yesterday, I remember was sitting here, but don't remember the face. So maybe someone they were saying, but are they aware of the pollution? Maybe it was you. Kind of. Yeah. I cannot remember your face now. So we will see now what is the magnitude of what is happening. Because when I say the protection of the environment sounds very, you know, for us in the West, it sounds like we want to preserve the forest because on Sunday we want to go picking mushrooms. Here we are on another level. So again, this picture that we have seen before. Okay. And this is a bit making, I mean, just to show that basically the pollution is everywhere because you got it into the soil, into the air, into the dust, in the water, and then with rain goes basically into the underground water that then goes into the soil again, and then into the crops, and therefore into the animals. So you're basically exposed to pollution on any side inside of Pasco. The air is polluted, the dust is polluted, and the dust is not just you breathe the dust, as we breathe here, like with cars, PM 2.5, PM 10, but it also dust that deposit, for example, on the food, either in the market or at home. And then imagine children goes around and play around, and everything they take, they put it in their mouth, and then another exposure of dust. And then obviously water. And water in Peru in general, not only in Cerro de Pasco, is very expensive water in the bottle. So nobody actually can afford it. So people drink water from the tap, which is polluted. And then obviously the food. You go out to the market, you buy the food, and the food is polluted. Every type, from vegetables to meat to fish, everything. So we have analyzed heavy metals, 21 heavy metals in the hair of 196 children across the 3 years between 2016 and 2018. And all of them, with no exception, if we would have applied the European regulation, they should have gone in urgency in hospital for the presence of heavy metals. All of them. There were no one that was, I don't say clean, but polluted not in a dangerous way. You know, there are two levels. One is like you have a pollution, but you are contaminated, but go home, drink more water, stay out from pollution. And there is another that is, oh, you are in a bad situation, you have to come to the hospital tomorrow. Okay, they were all of them in this space. And look at the lead. This is the limit, 0.1, and the average was like 6, so like 60 times more. And arsenic, that you probably know, used to be a poison, used to be used as a poison, so it's a very poisoning element. Lead, we will speak about lead later. Lead is so pollutant that has been banned from every gasoline since 20 years.
It's a comparison with the controller.
Yeah, this is a comparison. So the red one is the limit, the WHO limit, and the brown is a community that is 50 kilometers far away, but with the same condition. Because, you know, I mean, you do this always in a study. But especially in Cerro de Pasco, because that particular situation at 4,500 meters, it's very cold, you know, the environment, the situation is very peculiar. So you need something similar to compare. So we took a village 50 kilometers far away. In Cerro de Pasco, not directly. There has been some, like, why don't we work together, you know, from the company, but not direct, neither nor intimidation nor corruption, not direct in Cerro de Pasco. In other cases, yes. And so this is a study that we have done together with some doctors, and this study has been published in Nature, so it's highly reliable. And we have done this study to basically see between Cerro de Pasco and Carguamayo, which is this control community, how much the kids are sick in one place or another. So the chances to people to get nosebleed, to children, we are speaking only by 5-15 years for children, to have nosebleed in Cerro de Pasco are 15 times higher than in Carguamayo. The white spot on nails, now I know you will start all watching your nails. Those are a typical sign of problem in your, I mean, it's a typical sign of heavy metals intakes, okay? I know that all of you now starts. But in Cerro de Pasco, they are 12 times higher. And colic, dermatologic alteration, they are 7 to 6 times higher. And same for mood alteration and depression. Cerro de Pasco, the second causes of death for people between 18 and 30 years is suicide. So there's a lot of mood alteration and problems. At the beginning, what we thought was that people suicide a lot there because it's ugly city, horrible. But then we realized when we studied with doctors that actually there is a lot of heavy metals, especially mercury, influence your mood. There is a reduction of visual field, so they don't see like on the side. And then this last study we did on the QI, the intellectual coefficient. And this is super interesting because I will focus on this quite a lot because I mean, they study economy, so I wanted to focus on this aspect. Paragsha is, well, Cerro de Pasco. We call it Paragsha because we didn't take the entire city, but just a part of it, which is called Paragsha, just to you know, we didn't have enough resources to take the entire city. And Carguamayo. The average IQ of children in Cerro de Pasco is 12 points lower than in Carguamayo. Now, 12 points difference of IQ is the difference from being able to become an engineer and struggle to finish secondary school. Globally, it's considered 100, the average. And if I remember well, it's 82 Cerro de Pasco and 94 Carguamayo. So Carguamayo is slightly lower, which is okay. I mean, it's kind of normal. We will see in a couple of graphs later. Then generally, like, you know, it's a remote area on the top of the Andes in a developing country. So it's normal that it's a bit lower, 100. But 82 is actually low. It's pretty low. And look, almost, I mean, more than 50, almost 60% is below the average. Yeah, 41% is below the Peruvian average. No, I was wrong. 82 is the Peruvian average. Sorry. So Carguamayo is pretty much the same, and Cerro de Pasco is a bit lower.
That is almost like Forrest Gump IQ that was mentioned in the film.
How much was it?
So
I don't remember Forrest Gump. I saw it so many years ago. Okay.
Really low.
No, I mean, yeah, I think you came out with a great example. We use it again. I'll give you credit. But then I have to watch the movie to see exactly how much was it, Forrest Gump. But yeah, but that's the point, you know. You're like Forrest Gump, which then that is a movie, and he becomes rich and does everything wonderful and whatever. But in general, not in a movie, your life won't be very easy. And mostly there is a lower chance that you will become an engineer, that you'll become a doctor. Maybe some of them can, with a lot of, willing, a lot of study, but it's definitely more difficult.
For example, when you go there to explain things, it's very difficult because it takes a lot for them to understand.
Yeah, 75, great. Yeah, that's actually something. So we wanted to do this study since ever in Cerro de Pasco because it's something that you realize. We started working there in 2008. So, and for years we wanted to do something like that because you realize it. I mean, when you speak with people, especially with children, you realize another thing is that they are very small, they don't grow. When we did this study with the doctor, we plan to study between 5 and 15 years. So they bring their instrument. They were from Spain and Portugal. They bring their own instrument. And, their instrument to measure the pressure. There are, I don't know if 3 or 4, but there are different sizes. There is the children's size that normally works from 3 to ahead. And then there is the neonatal one below 3. We were working between 5 and 15, so they brought the children's side and it didn't work. They had to go and buy a neonatal one there because they are too small. So that's something that we always realize also when you speak with people. I mean, I don't want to but when you speak with Forrest Gump, you realize that he's Forrest Gump, But then we always had problem in how to properly measure until last year that we had funds first. And then we found also a good partner because you need a psychologist. So we work with a team of 5 psychologists from the University of Lima, and we work there. And it's a test that lasts 2 hours, that is widely recognized, and there are 5 different type of IQ that you measure. I didn't go into the details, but there is I keep changing. But there is the movement IQ that you do this thing, for example. Then there is the learning when they speak to you, the visual one to playing Pictionary or something like that. So there are the verbal one, how can you speak and everything. So and then now finally to this one, there is a direct correlation between the concentration of lead into the body of the kids and their IQ. As you can see here pretty clearly, the blue one are Cerro de Pasco and the green one is Carguamayo. There is an 11% correlation of the concentration of lead between the concentration of lead and their IQ for each children. And then there is 11% correlation of lead, 6% on cadmium, 5% on arsenic, 4% on manganese, and 4% on antimony. I mean, the problem is not only lead, there are several metals. So there is a huge correlation between the amount of heavy metals they have in their body and their IQ. But, and this is where also I think from an economic point of view, the thing stands out, there is one thing that influences more than the metals, and is the level of education of their parents. It's the only thing that influences more. So what does it mean? It means that these kids with a high level of metals, they will probably be less educated, and therefore their kids will probably have a lower IQ. So it's basically an impact that goes beyond one generation. Even if we stop now all the mining and these kids they can grow and whatever, but the impact will be also on the next generation because they won't be able to have a high level of education, and therefore this will influence their kids too, in a lower way, obviously, but still. Because obviously, you probably don't know, but our IQ and our brain develop in the first 6.5 years, between 5 and 6.5 years. Then obviously you can learn things, you can study, you can keep your brain, active. So now you don't have to stop doing everything because your brain won't develop anymore. But the what is called the intelligence, or at least these parameters, develop in the first 5 years. And that's why also our study was 5 to 15, because after 5, your IQ might change 1 or 2 points, but the big part will be the same. And this, and I come now to the point, to your points, to the economy. This is an hypothetical graph that has been a study of what happened if on a population of 100 million people, you reduce the average IQ by 5 points. You basically increase what is called mentally retarded by 57%. From 6 million, so in a normal like Gauss curve, you have 6 million mentally retarded, 6 million gift, and 88 million like in the average. But if you move it on 5 points, it's 2.4 million gift and 9.4 million retarded. Now imagine at Cerro de Pasco we are talking about 12 points. So we are basically created a lot of Forrest Gumps in Cerro de Pasco, in big numbers. And this is a study, so I'm focusing now more on lead, just because the lead has been more studied, okay? But when we talk about Cerro de Pasco, always keep in mind that there is not only lead. So there are several impacts of several metals on top of each other. But the lead is actually the one that has been more studied because you are all too young, but we remember that it was in the gasoline until what was probably 20 years ago, something like that. Probably more, probably even 30. But anyway, was in the gasoline. And then all of a sudden, someone realized that it was a problem, because the presence of lead in the gasoline actually reduced the brain development of children. And therefore, there are a lot of studies on lead. And this one is in Flanders, which is the best one that I found. And there is basically a calculation of the IQ loss with the concentration of lead over 20 milligrams per liter, which is basically everyone in Cerro de Pasco or even more, and how this reflects on the economy. So basically, according to different studies, we are talking about 15 basically million euro per year in Flanders, billion, sorry, because it's 6 zeros, 10, 6. So 16 billion a year in Flanders just for the reduction of IQ of 0.66. So 1 point in Flanders, so it's a small region, okay, but it's 15 billion euro loss for 1 point of IQ lost because of the gasoline 20, 30 years ago. And this is, again, another graph where you can see that basically the country with a higher IQ, and this is a bit of a double, a circle. They have a higher GDP because obviously people they produce more from one side, but then on the other side, obviously you have a higher GDP, then you invest more in study and therefore increase the well-being and everything. But it's pretty much linear, the fact that reducing the IQ of the population will dramatically reduce the economy of that population. And another study, this one in New York, on violence. Because as I mentioned before, there is an alteration mode, so a problem with the behavior of people with contamination of heavy metals. So New York, as you can imagine, when there was gasoline with lead, there were a lot of lead around. And those two scales are a different moment in time, because obviously if a 5-year-old, you are not violent, even if you breathe lead, but you become violent 20 years later. So I think there is a 23 years delay in the two scales. But basically, you can see an overlapping of the reduction of crimes that happened in New York City in at the end of the 90s with the ban of gasoline. And same for teen pregnancy with a lower delay, if I remember well, 15 years. So it might even be, obviously, those type of analysis, they have a lot of factor in it. For sure, in the 90s, there have been probably, more awareness, more, maybe the police were working better, whatever you want. But there is still pretty strong correlation.
Absolutely. Have you ever been in Gela in Sicily, where there is the biggest refinery in all Europe? It was just a matter of curiosity.
No, I know that there is, but no, I've never worked there. Are you from there?
Yeah, no, I'm from Sicily, but I know pretty well the Gela situation.
And this is another graph on the UK. Obviously, the majority of these studies are, you probably know, from the United States, Europe, UK, because that's more data. You won't find something like this in Peru, unfortunately. But so this is the IQ divided by a group of 10 points. And this is the number of violence episodes, the average. And it's kind of linear that the people with the higher IQ, they have the lower chances to do some violent crime. Again, there are obviously a lot of other, if you have a higher IQ, you're probably also more educated, and therefore there's another aspect. So you probably also gain more money. So there is also another aspect, whatever. But on a big scale, because it is a study that took basically the entire population in jail in the UK. It's like a huge study that's been done by the Cambridge University. On a big scale, you can see that there is a pretty linear. And this is another one, another study, this one in the United States, with the number of crimes and the criminal behavior, again, in depending on their different IQ. So basically, by polluting the environment, you are reducing the brain development and therefore the IQ of the people, and you are creating a population that is less productive, more violent, which obviously means less productive again. And then on the long term, it's pretty obvious. We have to think about 20, 30, 40 years, not 5 years. Obviously, 5 years is amazing. You take a lot of money from the mine, sell it over, and that's it. But think in 20, 30 years, you will have a population that is lower IQ, will pass the lower IQ to their children, and also higher violence. So just to conclude, because I saw that yesterday you were also interested in what we do in these kind of cases. So I step out a little bit from the economic aspects and the lesson, and what you can do when you find something like this, what we do as an organization, and what in generally other organizations do when there is a case like this. There's not so much you can do. There are a few things, but basically we can summarize in 6 things. Oh, this one is smaller because it's a mistake, but but actually, OECD guidelines. The computer loves me because I don't believe in this. Okay, it's like, to me, just cover the mic. It's bullshit. But I know that a lot of people works on this, and especially here. So close your ear. So start with this one. And Professor Giuliani knows this way better than me, but it's basically a framework of companies and government, of well-being, which is, from my point of view, which I said yesterday, and I remember today, I'm an activist, so I'm someone in the field. And when you're there, the OECD guidelines is more like a sort of ticking the box for companies. So the companies agree to the OECD guidelines and to other guidelines and try to be, but okay, it's better than nothing, okay, but at the end of the day, I have seen companies with the highest score on the OECD guidelines than in the field doing whatever. Also because, as I mentioned yesterday, most of the time, those companies don't work in the field with their original name. I forgot about to put a slide in Cerro de Pasco. Cerro de Pasco is, the mine is now administered by a company called Cerro Sac. Cerro Sac is owned 99.9% by Volcan, which is the previous owner of Cerro de Pasco. So before it was Volcan, then there was some trouble, some sue over Volcan. Then Volcan sold the company to Cerro Sac, but Cerro Sac is 99.9% Volcan. But Volcan is 51% owned by Glencore, which is in Switzerland with an offshore base in the Jersey Island. So let you imagine. And the major shareholder of Glencore is the Qatar sovereign fund. So, and now Glencore is trying to sell its part of Volcan again. So, and Glencore probably have an high score in OECD guidelines, whatever. But then on the ground there is no real Glencore there. So the other one is basically what we did. One of the papers that you read is actually shareholders and investors commitment. So in this case, for example, Volcan before and then Glencore, both, they had, I mentioned yesterday about the Norwegian sovereign fund. So all this money that the Norwegians made with oil, they create this fund and they invested in several other things, including Volcan and Cerro Sac. And Glencore. And so we work with the Norwegian Ethic Council, which is a council ethic that advises the Norwegian pension fund, and made them divest from Volcan and Glencore. So this was a big achievement because they divest $1 billion from Glencore, which is quite a lot of money. And so this is one thing that you can do, like what is also called active shareholders. So try to engage with the shareholders and try to make them either push for the different actions or just divest as a protest. Then you can dialogue with the government, obviously, but again, it's very hard. For example, I mean, in Peru, all the regional government, impossible to dialogue. The national one, I don't know if you follow the news, but now there is a golpe, there is a coup d'etat that has been a few months ago, so the government now is illegitimate. And the previous one was even unable to work. And then the previous one, I mean, it's really hard to work with government. In some other cases, we had better things happen. For example, working in Italy, as much as you can complain with the government in Italy, it's still easier, obviously, than, and you can have a sort of dialogue. Dialogue with company, it's something that you can try. In some cases, some companies willing to dialogue, some companies not. This mine, owned by Volcan, we sent to Volcan and Cerro Sac 16 times, 16 letters to have an appointment with them. We never managed. 16, all with a stamp that they receive it and whatever, nothing. Then when Glencore bought it, Glencore was way more willing to dialogue, and I had several meetings with them. So generally, the bigger company, they have an image to defend. So therefore, generally, the bigger company, they tend to be more open to dialogue. And then, you know, some other factors, some companies are more willing to have an open dialogue, some other not. But then change things is obviously different things. Then you can do advocacy. So basically press campaign, protest, doing whatever. I mean, in this case, for example, the community wants just walk from Cerro de Pasco to Lima, which is like 500 kilometers. They walk for 3 weeks all the way to Lima, and then they chain themselves to the prime minister office. You know, all those type block the road, all those type of activities, and also, you know, press conferences, try to get the news out, which is always, you know, especially we were a bit, you know, we managed to have the news of Cerro de Pasco out on National Geographic, on BBC, like huge media, but always before Glencore stepped in. And Volcan didn't care. Volcan was a small company owned by a family in Peru. I mean, with shareholders in the British Virgin Islands, so nobody really cared if there was a BBC. Obviously, if you have Glencore, if you have Shell, if you have any like company that has more a public image, then they're not happy to get out on BBC. The title of the article of BBC was, "Is this the most polluted place on Earth?" So like pretty strong one. And then obviously you can sue the companies, either at national or international level. You can try. At national level is always harder because some judicial system is ineffective or corrupt again. So it can be hard. International level can be very long, because if you go to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights or the European Court of Human Rights or the International Criminal Court, it's like ages. It takes ages to get your case. You know, there's a queue that is literally like, and the last time I spoke with someone from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, they told me that the queue at that moment was like 6 to 7 years. So you comply a case and basically you are 7 years in the queue, kind of, just to simplify.
In order to put that, because of course, I was working for lawyers, for judges.
There are 4 for an entire continent. Yeah. Plus the Pasco Commission, then in the court, there are 4 people working for an entire continent of 1 billion people. I mean, they put the max effort, but there are 4.
Massive practice.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, either you exhaust domestic remedies, or you can prove that the state is unwilling or unable to do. So you don't have to do all the steps. You just have to prove that the state is unwilling or unable to take action. So yeah, this is basically what you can do in a case like this, which does not include bomb it.